Hello architects! In this video, we're going to have a look at message channels. As we start to build out sustainable and reactive and asynchronous first systems, typically we need some kind of medium to pass these messages in. And this is where message channels become vitally important. And if we look at what I consider the absolute Bible of integrating systems together, which is enterprise integration patterns, we can see that the definition of a message channel is where one application writes information to the channel and the other one reads information from that channel. This is very particular. We've got a very particular way that these components talk to each other. So in this video, we're going to have a look at two of the simplest types of message channels and two of what are probably the most common, which are point-to-point channels and publish-subscribe channels. And to start, let's have a look at them as defined in the Bible itself. A point-to-point channel, importantly, ensures that only one receiver will receive a particular message. That means if a sender sends a message onto a channel, a point-to-point channel, and that point-to-point channel has, say, 10 receivers wired up to it, only one of them receivers will ever receive that message. If we think about how these can be implemented in the real world, a queue is a typical example of a point-to-point channel. We pop an item on a queue and we expect one receiver to ever receive that message. And then the second type of channel is what we call a publish-subscribe channel. And this is almost the complete opposite of a point-to-point channel, really. So a publish-subscribe channel delivers a copy of a particular event to every single receiver. So here we see we've got a publisher publishing an address changed event. That address changed event has 3 subscribers and all 3 subscribers get the same version of that event. Both useful in their own way, as we'll see in a second as we look at the application code. So here we are back in our IDE now, and let's have a look at these different types of message channels and how we can actually implement them using AWS technologies. So with our application code that we've seen, everything we've seen so far has just been us calling this message publisher.publish method or the send method on our message publisher. So if we actually go and have a look at what that actually looks like under the hood. Of course, this is all .NET code. These same ideas apply to whatever programming language you're using. And when we think about integration services on AWS, especially the serverless managed services, we've got Amazon EventBridge, we've got the Amazon Simple Notification Service or SNS, and then we've got the Amazon Simple Queue Service or SQS. And each of these 3 services naturally fit to a different type of message channel. So if we remember our point-to-point message channels, they are typically where you want to guarantee that there's one receiver for whatever the message is that you are sending. Typically this would align to things like commands or queries where you're expecting the work to be done once. I don't want to send a create order command and then that be processed 10 different times because nobody wants 10 of the same thing. Unless it's pizza, of course, then everybody loves pizza, right? So SQS is a really good fit for our send method, where we're sending a command or sending a query to a specific endpoint. So what we're doing here is somebody calls the send method with a message. We're going to send that message onto an SQS queue in this instance. Then that SQS queue is going to be specified as part of the endpoint of our message. So that's simple. We send the message onto the queue. We've got one receiver wired up to the queue. It processes the message as and when there's work to be done, and when there's no work to be done, if we're using serverless and Lambda, then there's no worker there, there's no processing being done. It's reactive, remember. And then if we look at our publish method, this is where things start to get a little bit more interesting. Because when we think about the managed options at AWS, we've got SNS and we've got EventBridge, both publish subscribe, both support different kinds of subscribers, both support filtering. Unless you're doing things like app to person, where you want to send a text message to somebody, which is what SNS can do and EventBridge can't, it can be quite hard to make the distinction between the two. But here in our implementation here, we've got this publish method, and that publish method is basically going to check what the endpoint is that we're trying to send to. So if we're specifying an SNS topic specifically, then we'll use the SNS client and we'll publish the message to SNS. Otherwise, we'll just default to sending the message, publishing the event on EventBridge. And again, typically publishing, subscribing is more relevant for events. Point-to-point channels are more relevant for things like commands and queries. But if we come back to this topic of SNS versus EventBridge, which one would you want to use? The way I like to think about this is using a quote actually from Gregor Hoppe, who wrote Enterprise Integration Patterns. He literally wrote the Bible on this stuff. And the quote from Gregor, and sorry Gregor if you're listening, this is paraphrased, is that the amount of coupling you should want in your system is directly related to the amount of control that you have over the endpoints. And if we apply that to SNS versus EventBridge, well, with SNS, you're publishing your messages to a specific topic. You see, as part of our implementation here, we actually need to read the endpoint from that specific command to then know where to send the message. And you typically have, different types of channels. So you'd have maybe a create order channel, you might have an order created channel, you might have an order updated channel. These are all separate topics, completely distinct SNS resources. That's slightly more coupling, because as a producer, I need to know where that topic is and I need to know about all the different topics. And then as a consumer, I also need to know where that topic is and about all the different topics that I might be interested in. Whereas if we think about EventBridge is just a message bus. I'm just publishing the event to a central location, and then my consumers can simply subscribe, add a rule to that same central location. So the coupling is a lot less because everybody's publishing and subscribing to the same single location. So the way I personally like to think about SNS versus EventBridge, unless you need something specific like text messages or first in, first out, like ordered messages, if you're doing work within your bounded context, within your service, within the kind of domain of things that you have control over, then maybe use SNS, because that amount of coupling, that additional coupling you get, needing to know where all these different topics are, isn't that relevant because you own everything. Once you start doing things between bounded contexts, from my order service to my dispatch service, to my loyalty point service, to my marketing service, that's where EventBridge becomes a much more convincing option, because we reduce that coupling even more. We're just publishing events to a central place and then subscribing to them events from a central place. So that's a really nice heuristic that I like to use if I'm thinking about SNS versus EventBridge when it comes to publish, subscribe. Now, of course, if we're thinking outside of the realms of AWS, we have services like Kafka, we have services like RabbitMQ, all of which you can run on AWS, of course, but these same ideas apply. And we'll if we're using RabbitMQ, we've got queues within RabbitMQ, which would mean we'd probably be doing point to point. But we also have topics within RabbitMQ, which is more suited to publish, subscribe. So in all these different messaging integration technologies, there are options for both of these things. So just to round out, let's come back to our actual definitions. So when you start thinking about these messages and how you're going to integrate your systems together, think about what exactly is it that you want to use to implement these. Is it publish, subscribe that you're doing? Do you want to send an event, a notification, anything like that, and have infinite number of subscribers? Just loads of people who you don't need to know about or care about, interested in that message and subscribing to them as and when they need to. If that's the case, then use publish, subscribe, SNS, EventBridge, things like that. If you want to send a message that you're expecting a specific receiver and one receiver to process, then you want to default to more point-to-point type communication. That will typically be things like queues, is the most likely example of a point-to-point message. That's all for this video. As always, if you've liked, then please like the video, please subscribe. If there's any other topics you'd like to see me cover in future videos, whether that be about architecture, sustainability, AWS, event-driven architecture, then please reach out on social media, and I will see you all next time.